Excited to speak with LL, who has such a fascinating story, whatever we talk about. So I'm really excited for this interview today. And I'm glad that you all can be here with us. I know we wanted to start off with you doing a little bit of a reading.
Is that okay, right? Everybody? Yeah. Knocks Mamie down up on my lap. He likes to be read to, but we'll see what happens. I don't know, what did you just drop? Oh, not your bracelet. Quick.
It's okay. It's
rescue.
It is costume jewelry from the 40s, so it's
very nice.
Unsturdy.
That happens. I know. I had these slip earrings. I was sure I was going to lose. All right. So this is the prologue to the book. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Florida has long been a target of public outrage. As far back as 1922, the New York Times warned its readers, and this is a real excerpt. Florida Purity League moves to protect the married men. St. Petersburg, Florida, January 25th. Mayor Frank Pulver had a request today from the St. Petersburg Purity League that he appoint a bathing suit inspector. Formal communication from the organization stating that the league intends to protect the married men from the wiles of the CBAM. The ensuing swimsuit shakedown made national news, launching an enduring interest in beachgoing, specifically. I should probably do this on my. To St. Petersburg's beaches. Sorry, Knox. It was one of the more successful publicity stunts in history, dreamt up by the city's promotional guru, John Harris Lodwick. Have any of you ever heard of John Lodwick? No. Real person. After a dazzling run, however, the Depression toppled the tourism industry. Still, the indefatigable Lodwick kept up his efforts, continuing to plant stories of a Floridian paradise in newspapers as far away as Chicago, Charleston, and Bloomington. By the time Roosevelt announced his New Deal, St. Petersburg was first in line for Works Progress Administration dollars. Drawn to this promise of renewal, in 1932, Lloyd Doc Young moved his wife and 2 children to St. Petersburg to capitalize on what he perceived would be a ready market for his forever young elixir, a 29-cent potion he sold for $1.99. In fact, Young would go on to establish the Sun City Emporium. Wait, did I say that? Which he built as the world's most unusual drugstore. A 3-story retail space, Sun City covered an entire city block and sold everything from chewing gum to mermaid shows to Doc's now infamous medicinal cure. Lodwick and Doc met during these hurly-burly days, developing lost leader programs such as selling dollar bills for 95 cents and fresh hot breakfast for 2 pennies. No scheme was too outlandish to pursue. The onset of World War II, however, slowed the movement of goods and people. And though Lodwick and Young reconvened to discuss fresh ideas to reinvigorate development, Lodwick wouldn't live to see the rebound. In 1942, while traversing his beloved metropolis, the tireless promoter slumped forward in a streetcar, dead from a heart attack at 52. Thus, it was up to Doc to realize the plan he and Lodwick had conceived, with a few key differences. Whereas Lodwick wanted to attract visitors by writing articles about beautiful women, Young wasn't one for writing press releases. Besides, he reckoned it would generate more ink to export the news. Doc's proposal? The Sun City Emporium Girls, a touring troupe of young women who could project a wholesome innocence while wearing 2-piece bathing costumes, not to mention other assorted goods from Sun City's new line of women's wear. We'll send the girls out on a war bond tour in my old Crossley. But war rationing was still in effect, and items like gasoline and spare tires were hard to come by. Doc would have to take his plan to the town's movers and shakers. St. Pete's the perfect place for returning GIs to spend their entitlement dough, Doc Young enthused in his presentation to civic leaders. Mayor Williams jumped at the idea, except for the name. Showing his lack of imagination and decidedly provincial flair, the mayor felt that slapping a commercial name on the tour, even one that was a nickname for St. Petersburg itself, would discourage the financial and goodwill support they needed. Instead, they became known as the Florida Girls, though whenever possible, Doc insisted the store's name accompany the moniker, making for the clunky and never-used addendum, of Sun City Emporium. Eventually, the tour would reach as far as New York City and Los Angeles, ushering in a new era of prosperity for St. Petersburg and the Sun City Emporium alike. And so it was that Florida's post-war population explosion became part of history. Like most stories, this is but one version, the public version. Lodwick may well have put the Bathing Beauties idea in the minds of Mayer and Doc Young, but the war bond tour was the handiwork of his wife, one Mrs. Kathleen Young. Even with the extreme changes in American life brought on by the war, no one could have guessed what she put in motion. In the end, the tour would involve U.S. Air Force intelligence, organized crime, and a power no one saw coming, the so-called girls. Well aware that their looks were being used as a lure, they couldn't have cared less. The girls were running their own con, and this is their story.
So I'm excited to dive into the book, but I want to back up a little bit first because you are an accomplished memoirist. You have 2 memoirs out there already.
Yes, I do.
And now this is my selfish question as a memoirist who wants to get into fiction. Why and how the jump to fiction? And is there anything that surprised you with the switch?
Well, that is an excellent question. So, how many people in here read memoir? I'm just curious. Oh, interesting. So many people that love fiction don't tend to love memoir. It's kind of interesting. A lot of people, they sort of, I only read fiction or I only read memoir. So it felt like a real leap for me because I didn't know if anybody, like I had written for years, I wrote all these essays and I wrote a lot of nonfiction and I had these 2 books out and this was just something entirely different. But the story actually came to me, well, through a couple of different ways. When I came to Florida, I had heard about that John Lodwick story. Now, John Lodwick invented the Purity League. They did not exist. The Purity League was in his brain, and one of the stories that I uncovered was a full-page Sunday spread in the San Francisco Examiner that he managed to place. And if you remember newspapers, you remember that like the Sunday paper, that was like the be-all and end-all, that said something like, "We must protect men from the wiles of the sea vamp." And he convinced all of these people that there was this real problem with really tiny bathing suits in Florida. Somebody's got to do something about it. People flocked to Florida shores. And I had heard that story, so I just, that was in my head. And then I saw this photograph of these women wearing 1940s era bathing costumes. And if you remember that look, it's so specific. It's like the high waist, the kind of low cut, the top with kind of an architectural bra top and chunky platform shoes. And these ladies, they're all getting onto a bus. And there were other pictures that I saw that were these poster girls. They call them the poster girls, the real people who comprise this team. I saw a photo of them out in California where they were having a little tussle with the California, I don't think they were called the Raisin Girls. That could be just my 2024 brain sticking a name on them. But they had these this quote from Doc Young where he said, well, I am trying to keep these young teens off of the streets and I am helping lessen juvenile delinquency. And I was like, what? What is going on here? And so this war bond tour, I looked into these women after I had learned about them and I found out that they toured from the 30s all the way up through the 60s. That included during World War II. And my first thought was, well, World War II was a time when we didn't have gasoline. We had gasoline rationing, tire rationing, I mean, coffee was rationed, butter was rationed. You had to be somebody a little shady to be able to get travel rations. These weren't famous girls. So who did I put them with? Of course, the Tampa Mafia. Like that, who else funded this thing? And so in this book, there's a connection because they're helping this store along. And then other events conspired. Oh, do we have Tampa Mafia here? Just kidding, of course not.
What happens?
There's no such a, that's right.
And that camera right there.
That's right. Just a joke. Anyway, so and then the pandemic. So I before I wrote memoir, to get back to your question, I wrote fiction pretty much exclusively. And in fact, I wasn't really that interested in memoir, but then life events kind of conspired to make me thus, right? I moved to Qatar, which is in the Persian Gulf, and I got this job over there so that my husband could become a freelance foreign correspondent. And it seemed to me like the way to kickstart our family, because it would just sort of launch us both into the next phase of our careers. And what happened was, he got on a plane and called me, or no, he didn't call me, he sent me an email to tell me that we needed to talk, which you know what that means. And when we talked, he told me he wanted a divorce. Now, if you're surprised, imagine how I felt. So we hadn't talked about divorce. This was out of the blue. And so there I was in one of the world's most patriarchal cultures. I was about to turn 40. I had gone through an early menopause at the age of 38. And I was clearly not ever going to have my own children. So I had to sort of redefine who I was as a woman in this very, what I would call, hostile environment toward women. Except was it? So it became a book. And because my initial plan was to write a bunch of witty essays, because, I mean, Qatar is a weird place. You're in the mall, people are wrapped head to toe in black, and they sort of sail along on these like very expensive Gucci sandals past Victoria's Secret ads, like in the mall. And you can smell in the air oud, which is a ceremonial incense, and Starbucks coffee. And it's just like constantly. Am I in a suburban shopping mall or the Wild West or some weird other alien place? So I planned to write witty essays because I wrote a lot of, I have a degree in journalism, and I wrote a lot for newspapers and such, to sort of keep that side of myself alive. But the reason I didn't go into journalism is because I very quickly found out that I could not cover the news objectively. I would have made a fortune, right? Like, imagine, I could have started the trend of like whatever. But I thought, well, if I can't be objective, I can't really write about news. So I wrote about arts and culture, and I did a lot of feature reporting as a side gig to my real day job, which was marketing and communications. And so I had taken this marketing job out in Qatar, and then I found myself alone, and I was like blogging like crazy, because most people, when they started blogs back in the early aughts, it was to go on and pretend they were someone that they weren't. But I had to pretend I was someone that I wasn't all day long in this office in Qatar. So when I took to my blog, I was like, this is the real deal, people. And it was just, the lid came off, and I mean, unfettered. In fact, no, it was called Untethered. It's not around anymore. But I saved all of those, and I had also been collecting notes for these essays, and I realized it had to be a memoir, because it wouldn't do the story justice, because it just wouldn't be believable. It's like, come on. Oh, now she's in menopause. Like, who goes through menopause at 38? No! So it had to be a memoir. And then I wrote the second memoir. I guess it's like an addiction. And
Addicted to Memoir, the third book.
That's right. But it really was about my addiction to the wellness industry, because then I moved to India to study yoga and meditation, and I was like, went in the deep end there, and did all that stuff. And I had to write about that too, because wellness scammers, especially during the pandemic, they're there 24/7 to tell you how to be, and I couldn't stand it. I was just like, this is so much bullshit. So I ended up writing a second memoir, but I had since moved here, and then I met that guy over there. Hello. Look at this. Now we have a grandbaby, and I have bonus kids, and so it is. Everything changed. And what I want to write about, I still want to write about the same things. I mean, really, this is just a sneaky way to write about issues that face women. Putting a group of women on a tour to take on the mafia. What do you think is really going on there? Those plucky gals are they're sowing their wild oats and finding their way in a world that is not supportive. which I think is the truth for most of us most of the time. That was a long answer. Sorry, Jill.
I'll allow it.
Thank you.
That was great. That was wonderful. So I love that you have a journalism background, and now it seems like there's renewed hope that could be down the future for you, that you can go back into journalism. But I could really tell in your writing by the level of research and the amount of details in this book. I mean, almost every
Was it too much?
single
Did it bog you
sentence.
down?
No, it was awesome. Almost every single sentence had some sort of detail about their clothing or the language, or even just how society would react to certain things that we react differently nowadays. So to have that level of detail in the book was so fascinating and so interesting for me as I was going through. When you were in your research process, was there anything that was really challenging for you or surprising for you that you found out when you were researching?
Well, honestly, the biggest surprise was that this became a series of books, because I imagined this would be a standalone. First of all, I wasn't even sure if I could write a novel. I was like, well, I'll give this a try, see how it goes. I mean, I had written lots of short stories and sent them off to the New Yorker, as a 20-year-old does. And I had written all kinds of, journalistic stories and long pieces, but a full-length novel I had not written. And when the pandemic came, we were stuck, it struck me as emotionally resonant with that moment at the end of World War II. I mean, World War II took a pandemic length of time to end. I mean, it was clear after D-Day, which was in December of 1943. Was it December? I may have that date wrong. Don't hold me to it. But there was a definite battle that was fought. No, that was in June. It was in June of 1943. After that, the tide started to turn, but it wasn't over. And it wasn't over. And it was like that when the vaccine was coming. Not that, do I take a vaccine? Do I not take? Like all of that angst, the homeschooling, everything. And when is it going to be over? And do I want it to be over? And so there was that emotional resonance. And I wasn't expecting that either when you ask what surprised me. But I love doing that research. I mean, I actually read a lot of memoir to find out details about how people spoke to each other and what they were worried about, so that it makes sense, because these characters, they really reside in my head. I have full bios on all of them, and I've imagined childhood incidents. They're not in the book, but they're very rich characters. And they're all based in some part. There's some part of them that is someone that I know. Like, this is my grandmother. That's part of my mother. That's my Nana. That's my Aunt Roseanne. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean it's them, on the book, but there's a part of that nugget of truth in those characters. And so even the evil ones, I love. It's so easy to love evil people on the page. I wish I was that good in real life. If I could have that kind of charity and compassion for people the way I do for my characters. But with my characters, it's like I'm holding their whole story. So I understand why, how, what, where, when.
I want to ask you a little bit more about the development of those characters, because you say in your author's note in the end, so a lot of our history is written from the perspective of men, or written by men when we're looking back. And you said when you're researching, you found that, and so you began the story with Lloyd Doc Young, and then you said until the characters took over. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you?
The female characters.
Right.
So I had written 8 chapters of a totally different book, where it was the men's stories, and the men, because when you look up all of this stuff in history, you find that people, the stories are all the men, and they're very interesting. I mean, Mayor Pulver could be he could be a mini-series, I tell you what. He was a very larger-than-life character. I mean, he did a lot of businesses. So it's like all of these characters, I thought, oh, this would be a really fun playground to write about. And so then at one point I had this chapter called Sun City Politics. This was, I believe it was chapter 8. And I'm like, oh, I gotta bring some ladies. They need some arm candy. And you know, a couple things happened. One, I realized like, oh my, these people are much more interesting because they were the ones really pulling strings. Because Kathleen showed up on the page and she's immediately like telling Doc, okay, this is what you have to say and what you have to do. And I was like, oh, of course. So the book was originally starting in 1942, but then I changed it. Well, it was going to start then in D-Day, June of 1944, but I actually moved it up to December just to get that sort of speedier action. And you'll see when you read the book.
And you'll see.
Well, because then the second book too. So the whole series kind of laid out for me. I've written the second book. Coming out in January, and then the third one, maybe in June. I'm hopeful. We'll see.
So you talk about some evil characters, not evil necessarily, but challenging characters, and kind of falling in love with them. There are two characters that I found to be really complex. One was Thelma's mom,
Yes.
as Thelma had a terrible upbringing, and at the same time, her mom was doing the absolute best that she could.
Right.
The other character was Kathleen Lloyd, who was trying to run the show across the country and take care of her husband, which was also a scandalous relationship that got more scandalous the more you read into the book. And she had a lot to her of trying to keep it all together, and also things unraveling in her own life that she was trying to keep under wraps. When you were creating these characters, when you have characters with that level of depth, did you kind of see their whole story in advance, or did they develop as you wrote?
That's a good question, because I would say it's a combination of the two things. Because when I get characters into a scene, sometimes I have to pause and think, wait, how would these people actually react as who they are, and why would they react that way? And then it's not that I don't have some idea of who they are, but it's more just fleshing out. I mean, I can't even remember what I ate for lunch yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, I'd have to really think. So it's more a matter of just, you know, shining a light on more spaces in their attic, the secret corners of their mind and heart.
For sure, and that you do very well in the book. So, in life, with children, we're not technically supposed to pick our favorites. Nobody does, that's not a thing anyways, but in writing with your characters, did you find that you had a particular character that you just love to write?
Oh, that's a great question. I'd say it's whatever character I'm writing at the time. I mean, so this book has multiple points of view, which I thoroughly enjoy because I like letting the reader know things that the main character doesn't know, so that you're seeing her do something and you're thinking, no, what? No! Like, you don't know the wolf is right around the corner, but if she doesn't know and we're in her point of view, then you don't know either. So this gives you, as the reader, the opportunity to know that, and I really get into them when I'm in scene with them. And it's interesting how much I can be into them, like Mateo, totally into that character when I'm that character. And then when I'm Thelma, he is disgusting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun. It's like, I get to try on all my personalities.
Okay, so I have to ask, you know, the opposite of that. Were there any characters that you did not enjoy writing about?
I can't say that. That's my favorite thing. That and research, which that's why I like historical fiction, I guess.
I was going to say, I think you found your thing then. That's great. You touched on this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to go back to it more because I think it's really fascinating. When you and I talked before this event, you mentioned that there are you saw a lot of parallels between what women were going through in this time period and also what women are going through today. Can you share a little bit more about, I guess, things you were hoping to shine a light on, or what really stood out to you between the women's experience then as it compares to today?
I think, one of the interesting things that I really wanted to do with these characters is not pit them against each other, which, when you have sort of a thriller, there has to be some element of that. But the overriding thing that I wanted them to discover was how they could learn from each other, I guess, and not just like all the time. And I feel that to me is an important exercise in fiction, because sometimes in real life that's a lot harder to do. You go to the coffee shop and you get your order wrong, and maybe you're not friendly about it. Like it's not too often that you take the opportunity to think, well, how could I have done that better? Or maybe you do, I don't know. But sometimes you do. But in a book, it's an opportunity to help remind us to be those people all the time, right? Did that answer your question? I mean, I know it's a weird answer, but
I love weird answers.
But to me, it's really a way to do things that you can't do, whether you're a man or a woman. That's not really speaking to the women's rights of it all, but even in that, it's interesting. And everyone has a complicated legacy. Like, I have people they go to the Margaret Sanger Clinic, which for them was a revolution. But, Margaret Sanger has a very complicated legacy, which I didn't get into in the book. But that's why Thelma didn't go. But that's not why she didn't go in the book, plot-wise. But in mine, I just didn't want her to have any sort of whatever.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning too, just about how much independence women had gained during that period of time. Is there anything that you feel that reflects, I don't know, currently? I'm just kidding. We can talk about that more. We can keep going.
Well, it's true that women have, I think I saw an interesting meme the other day on Facebook, and it showed women in Afghanistan in the 1970s. And it was this picture of women. It could have been at a university here. And you see something like that, and you really recognize how far rights can go in one direction or the other. And even in the time that I lived in the Middle East, so I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Tunisia, and in Egypt they didn't cover at that time, but in Tunisia they did, even though women in Tunisia had more rights. It's very weird. The situation is very weird in Egypt. But women in Qatar did not, when I got there, they were all covered. Their grandmothers didn't cover. But then by the time I went back, I did a second gig there for the Tribeca Film Festival, and the abayas, which are the black wraps, they were no longer these plain black wraps, but they had all these beading and flourishes and other things, which would have just been considered, an abomination, 5 years prior to that. And that might sound like a very slight, what's the difference between you're covered, But even I was at the airport in Germany after I had been living in Qatar for a long time, and I saw this woman go past me in a miniskirt, and my first thought was, oh my God, cover yourself. And I was like, I've been in the Middle East for too long. Get out of here. You see what I'm saying? Those, I always like to say that equality is not natural. Humans are competitive people. All animals are competitive. That is our higher calling, right? That is what we can aspire to and what we can ascribe to. And it's never over. It's the same as you don't eat and you think, well, that was good, I'm done now. You don't take one shower and you're like, all right, it's just, it's something, right? I'm good, you guys don't care, do you?
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing, it's just ongoing. And when you think about it in those terms, or when I do, it gives me more hope that it's not like a slog. It is an opportunity. maybe there's a better meal tomorrow. Maybe I'll find a new shampoo that'll solve everything.
I'll get a stronger Febreze. Yes. In book 2, you are sending the girls from Florida to Vegas. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Well, so I have a little tagline that I work from while I'm writing the books to keep in mind what it is. And this one is, although it's not the tagline, the cover of the book tagline is, sometimes what happened in Vegas stays with you. But my note to self was, frenemies unite to take on a common foe in a town where no crime is too corrupt and no good deed goes unpunished. And it's because the government was busy fighting the war during the 40s, and the mafia got their hooks in everywhere. And in the later 40s in Las Vegas, before it was really built, like as the people who were building it up, I mean, there was so much money and so much corruption. I read this amazing book called The Greenfield Jungle, and it was written like in 1960, so not that long after the fact. And they were talking, like they had interviewed these police people and religious people, like a pastor is saying, well, I figure if he does the same thing in another town, he's not guilty. Well, is he not guilty in the eyes of the Lord or the eyes of the law? Like, first of all, it didn't make any sense. But also, he was basically saying that fine, just if you can get away with it here, then is it really a sin? No. Right? If it's like not against the law, is it?
That's an interesting bar.
Very flexible morality from a priest or preacher, and the law too. They were very flexible with how they felt about things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good. I'm excited to read that one then. I would love to know.
It did change how I wrote the book, though, because I had one idea for what was going to happen when she got there, and then when I started researching how lawless it was, I was like, whoa, I need to. I don't. What's going to happen now? So it took a real turn.
Well, that's exciting.
It was exciting.
I want to get back in a little bit to your writing process. So, do you generally plan out the whole story, or do you just kind of have some major plot points and then see where it takes you?
So I know where I want to start and where I want to end, which isn't like, it's more just, again, in this case, it's these characters. Like, this is what needs to happen this time. And in terms of plotting, I try to kind of do a structure for the whole book. But when I tried to really, so the first book, it was completely just, I had an idea of the beginning and the end, and then I was just making my way through. I had lots of time. I mean, nothing was happening. And I was just, typing and like, oh, that's interesting, that's fun. And like, I had so much editing to do. I thought, well, next time I'm going to try to really plot out. So when I started writing Vegas Girls, I started this really detailed plot. And then when I went to write it, I was miserable because it was like I felt like I was trying to make the puzzle pieces fit. So instead, I just got rid of the outline. I mean, it was still in there somewhere, but I didn't try to write to it. Instead, I just was writing to more of a shape. Because I like seeing it's like when you drive at night. All you need to see is what's in the headlamps, and that's kind of a good way to go with the novel, because again, even though I know all of this backstory, I have the full lights. If you turn the lights on, I know what's in the room, but it's not useful to the reader to know all that stuff either. So
I can't wait to get home and trash my outline. Thank you very much.
Do it.
Fabulous. I have one final question, and then we'll turn things over if the audience has any questions at all. But I would love to know, who would you love to see reading this book? You
mean like a human being?
Well, I'd love to see a dog reading it too. That'd be amazing. But yeah, is there a certain type of reader, or is there somebody that
I thought you meant
here's
my dream cast?
Okay, or that too. Choose your own question. What would you like to answer?
Well, I'd like to see my friend's husband Ray read the book, because he has a thing about not reading.
If you're watching, Ray.
He's definitely not. And but that's sort of a joke. But in terms of casting, I've thought about that, and it is really hard because I'd actually like to see. Unfortunately, she's a little too old. I'd love to see Kate Winslet play Kathleen Young, right? That's the store owner of Sun City Emporium with her husband Lloyd. And then Thelma is a lot trickier because, like, I thought, well, Zendaya could be good for Thelma. But Thelma, one of the big things about her is that she's very tall, like her father, Sal Giancarlo, who is, in my brain, modeled after Federico Fellini, who looks like an Italian gangster. I mean, that to me is like, that is, and he is kind of creepy, let's face it. But that was sort of the role model, and so Thelma needs to be tall. And who would you think? Who's a tall, dark-haired, light, like amber-eyed? Who? See, it's hard.
I was the worst Blockbuster employee that ever I'm sure somebody out here knows. Yeah, amongst my other careers, yes.
So, but I mean, Zendaya was as close as I came, but she's not quite the right.
All right, though. That's a good visual, though, for people to, just stretch your legs out a bit. So
yeah,
fabulous. All right. Well, thank you so much, LL, for all of answering all of my questions. Does anyone in the audience have questions?
Yes. It's okay. I don't need the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know I was going to ask this question until you mentioned it. As a 24-year-old memoirist, did you ever get published in the New Yorker? Because I've been trying since college.
Well, I was in the New Yorker for my storytelling, but I didn't get a story in there.
I was really, I was
But
going to
I've
go
been
home
in
and
the
look
New
it
York
up. I
Times.
was like, I've been reading the New Yorker for 10 years. I was like, I wonder if I've ever read anything she's written in there.
I don't know. Did you see their thing about after the debates? They wrote a headline on their New Yorker daily email. It was like, Kamala Harris did a good job. I'm like, oh, thank you for the scintillating insight. I mean, I don't know. It's just some things they're seeming less interesting. But that said, it would be a huge honor. I haven't submitted anything to them probably in 25 years.
Any other questions?
No questions? Did I really answer everything? Wow. Jillian, you're a fantastic interviewer.
Put it on my resume. There you go. Actually, well, I have questions. If you were giving advice to, say, I don't know, a 24-year-old memoirist or a 43-year-old memoirist, what advice do you have for writers and aspiring writers out there?
Do not stop writing. Just don't leave before the miracle happens. Keep at it, because you don't know what gems you're going to uncover. And if the idea is that you turn to books, for me, I turned to books as a child as a way to kind of understand the world, because I grew up in a not so healthy home environment. And I learned everything from books. And I still kind of do. And I think that there is someone out there who needs to hear your voice. And they never will if you don't keep writing. So if you're so inclined, do it. And send it to the New Yorker. But don't wait for them to respond. Send it to your local paper. Send it to the Rumpus. Send it to, any publication that puts out memoir. Because we live in a time when the gatekeeping has forever changed. And I think it's about time, because that's how you get more of a plurality of voices. And there's so much to choose from. And I was telling Jillian before this, I actually read a lot more widely than I used to, because I have audiobooks, I have physical books, and I have books on my phone. So I always have a book. And it just gives me so much, it makes so much more accessible. And it's a terrific way to participate in the culture, because if you're not, then you're not. I mean, I can't. It's very difficult, or there are very few women represented in history. That is not going to change if we don't represent ourselves. Because when a man writes the story, it's different. Let's be real. It doesn't sound the same. I mean, have you ever what's that Twitter? Or I'm not on Twitter anymore, but it used to be like terrible sex scenes in literature. God, so many bad ones. Jesus. Anyway, so.
I'm sorry, my brain can't stop now picturing a lesbian memoir written by a man.
Oh, but there were those. There definitely were those. That was my biggest fear because okay, there's a little bit of LGBTQ in the book, and the one person may grow up to be a lesbian pulp fiction novelist. We don't know, but I wondered, were there any actual women who were writing those stories? And there were. There was a woman named Anne Bannon who was a very famous in her time lesbian pulp fiction writer. Interesting character.
Sounds like there are more avenues to explore with this book.
So many.
Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes.
Did you get a lot of writer's block while we're writing this novel? And if you did, what did you do for this particular book? Anything you...
I made my husband suffer.
Nice.
Thank you!
No, I didn't really. I mean, where I get into trouble is when I feel that I write myself into a corner. Like, I've come up with this scenario, and I'm like, how are they going to get out of this in a way that's also plausible? Because I don't like those sort of hand of God. And then an earthquake happened, and everybody was fine. Like, okay. So I often have to talk about it, and so I'm like joking that I made my husband suffer, but I'm not really, because often I'll be like, "Hey, Paul, what do you think?" And he's like, okay, so he doesn't know what I'm talking about. Like, imagine I come to you, I'm like 300 pages into the book, and I'm like, okay, this person. He's like, I don't know who you're talking about, and I'm like, yes, thank you. Like, that's it. That's how those.
I can only picture like over morning coffee, and you're like, how do we
that
figure
too?
this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But usually I'm deep in an email at work, like I'm working from home, I'm deep in something, and she'll just come up and be like, listen, I'm in a place, I've got to go through these, gets in all the detail, and I'm just listening, and then, okay, and then 15 minutes later she's like, yes, that's the answer, and I'm like, okay, I'm glad I was able to help.
Exactly.
I think that the best cure for writer's block, though, is to just write something completely different. So now it's also got a complicated legacy, but there's a thing called NaNoWriMo. You don't have to do anything. The idea is during the month of November, you'll write a novel, which means you aim for about, 1,665 words a day, something like that. And that's how Florida Girls started, actually, as a NaNoWriMo project, because I think I felt stuck in my memoir. And I just thought, what is the idea I got? Let me see what happens. And I started writing another book, which actually began as, I thought, I'm going to try and write a romance. Can I do it? I can't, actually. They bore me. Because for me, it's the same, and it's not that I don't like romances, it's that it's the same problems you have with an outline. It's like, I know what's going to happen. So it's not, they meet, they fight, she goes one way, he goes another way. Crazy things happen, and then they come back together. It's only those two can, because they're meant to be. It was electric. So I couldn't write that either. It turned into like a murder mystery. But that may be my next series. I don't know. It's called Steel City Crime, just in case you're wondering.
That's awesome. All right. Anything else?
Yes.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.